name is Miranda. I'm better known as the Ghost Biker, and I travel around the country on my motorcycle to different haunted and historic locations. I am into more of the paranormal side of things and the folklore, storytelling, and legends side of things. I'm really a little more new into the cryptid side, but my field of study is more of the paranormal.
Well, what I've found in all of my interviews with people who have experienced some of the Bigfoot, Dogman, some of those, that a lot of the paranormal activity kind of has a bleed through. A lot of the very same things are happening. So tell me something about how you got started with paranormal.
Well, really, my love for the paranormal really kind of started when I was young. I grew up next door to my grandmother here in Northeast Tennessee, which is here in the Appalachian Mountains. And so I spent a lot of time with her, listening to her tell stories about growing up in the area in the early 1900s. And she would tell me stories about, as we call them around here, haints and boogers. And so that's where my love for this started. I spent a lot of time listening to her share stories, then time in the libraries listening to folklore and legends from some of the local old timers in the area, and really going into cemeteries and conducting paranormal research from a young age. I really didn't start essentially doing what we would call, I guess, full scale paranormal investigations until probably about 15 years ago. I was invited to join a team by analyzing a lot of their photography. My background is in marketing. Photography and design. And so I was really brought in to look at some of these photos to try to essentially either debunk or come up with logical explanations for what was happening in the imagery. And so one, photo turned into 40 photos. And so then I was invited to go on my first investigation. And then the rest is really, really history from there. I joined the team. I was their marketing specialist as well as their photo expert. And then I started off doing my own thing and created Ghost Biker. And then about 4 years ago, I became a location owner and co-own two historic and haunted locations so that we have paranormal tourism at.
Wow, you have quite a background. That's interesting. I want to go back a little farther though, because you caught my attention with your early years and going to these cemeteries. Now, was your grandmother with you at those cemeteries?
No, my grandmother, she was born in 1908. So when I was born in 1980, she she was relatively old at the time. And so she would just really share mostly stories. She was an old timer that learned to she planted by the signs. She would forecast the weather based on, the woolly worms or based on the fogs. She could tell when the first snowfall was going to hit based on when the fogs hit there at the end of the summer. And so, no, the she wasn't with me on any of the investigations, but she just really instilled that love as far as the supernatural goes through her storytelling.
How young were you when you would go to the cemeteries and do that research?
I was in my early teens.
Okay, so not a child, but yeah,
No, no. Now, I went with my grandfather when he would do genealogy research. So I would spend a lot of time in the cemeteries because he would go and he would research, family history and such. And at that point in time, I was probably around the age of about 7 or 8. So I spent a lot of time in cemeteries with them doing the research there for his genealogy.
I see. Did you ever see anything in the cemeteries or anything happen that was unusual?
Nothing more other than just hearing disembodied voices sometimes, disembodied voices or the, EVPs that we would capture on the recorders. I never really experienced anything as far as visually until I actually started going into some of these different locations and as far as the buildings and such, and actually actively seeking, asking questions, and doing paranormal research then, but within the last 15 years.
Yeah, when you were more serious and
Yeah.
actually doing the research. What did they say on those recordings? Do you remember anything, any messages that came through?
Usually just names. We would get names or sometime, I mean, nothing specific as far as an aha moment. Like I said, none of that really started until I was older, but just usually just several responses to questions, that sort of thing.
Hi, I'm Linda Eastburn of Linda Eastburn YouTube channel, and I have a new book out called Threshold to Encounters. It's about 40 years of research and experience with all of these wild cryptids that many of you I know have encountered yourself. You can find it on Amazon.com. Were any of the names people who were actually buried in that cemetery?
We have, yeah, we've received some of the names were ones that we were either speaking with or asking questions to. Yes, we were able to go and validate through some of the tombstones and such that were in the cemetery.
Well, that had to be interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Did you do anything with that information or just hang on to it? Or,
Just hung on to it.
yeah, you were pretty young to do much.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, a lot of that when I was younger was more just for fun, going in, seeing if we would get any responses or anything of that nature. Like I said, it really didn't start until I became doing it more seriously within the last 15 years.
So about 15 years ago, what prompted you to get into this in a more serious context?
Well, I was working, and one of the HR directors at the company that I was working for saw my background in photography. And so he reached out and asked if I would review some of the photos from some of their different investigations that they had done. And so I wasn't really sure what he was going to have me look at. And of course, each of the pictures that he would show me prompted me to, ask 15 to 20 questions about the photos as to, why did you take this specific image? What type of camera were you using? That sort of thing. He really wanted me to look at those photos to try to determine a logical explanation as to some of the things that they were capturing. And so, like I said, that prompted him to invite me to go on some of their more formal investigations and then join the team. So I ended up developing a system that I run photos through whenever either myself or somebody submits a photo that would essentially go in and try to determine if what we're experiencing in some of those photos is a logical occurrence or something based on the type of uh, camera or what or environmental changes that they're shooting at the time, versus something that could potentially be supernatural or unexplained.
So this is something you came up with. What does it entail and how did you devise this system?
Well, really, it's just, I mean, just with the nature of photography itself, digital cameras and digital photography produces artifacts that maybe a traditional film camera wouldn't produce. And then, of course, just your natural environment. If you're taking a photo and there's some type of shadow or some type of potential anomaly in the photos, shadows and light is going to react a certain way. So essentially, whenever he submitted these photos to me, I went in and, of course, would save the original. But when I would run it through my test, I would essentially destroy the photo by going in and taking out shadows, taking out some of the dark area, converting it to black and white, just running it through a series of different tests to see how the image reacts. Now, again, if they're telling me that they're taking it with a digital camera or a phone, and they're taking it at a certain time of day, or the conditions in the room, if it's like a damp day versus a dry day, all of those things go into play. So whenever the team member that I used to be a part of submitted those photos to me, I would always ask the questions about what they would, what the conditions were like, what type of camera, what was the time of day, what was, your shutter speed that you were using. all of these because some of these different things could contribute to potentially the what was showing up in the image. If it was a speck of dust, a hair on the lens, there's a lot of things that go into play. A lot of the time when people take these photos, if you take 99 photos, you're very fortunate if you even get one that may essentially have something unexplained in it. So he liked my style with that, and it was just a process that I developed myself based on my background in photography and shooting in some of these different conditions. And honestly, one of the things that I found that helps whenever you're going on a paranormal investigation, especially if it's outside, because outside there's a lot more environmental contaminants that could come into play. But if you're investigating either an outside area or inside of a particular building, I always suggest going in, taking photos during the day, because when we're in the middle of a paranormal investigation, whether it's day or night, the body tends to react different, and the mind is not a very reliable source when it comes to remembering different things that are in some of these rooms or in some of these areas. And things just tend to look different at night or when you're in the heat of an investigation. So I always suggest going in and taking a bunch of photos and assessing your environment beforehand, before you actually go in and start investigating.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, to do that. But in your research in the last 15 years, what are some of the more phenomenal things that you've actually found?
Probably one of the most unexplained and interesting ones are some of the disembodied voices that we've captured, especially when they are intelligent responses. I am a solo investigator, and so I'm either traveling by myself or traveling with my camera person for my series. And so I like to keep the numbers small like that so that I can go in and account for my environment and account for, if I'm in a location and I capture a male's voice and it's an isolated location where there's no outside contaminants, it's a lot easier to say, okay, I really can't explain this because I'm the only female on the property. And so probably those disembodied voices that respond intelligently have to be some of the most phenomenal things that I myself have captured. I was working on a case one time of it was the story of a local legend that led me to a home that was abandoned. The home did house a tub. It's kind of an interesting legend that is surrounded here, or I mean, that a lot of the folks in the surrounding areas here of East Tennessee know about. It's known as the Phantom Monk, and so I was on this investigation um, where the monk had perished in a train wreck in Charleston, Tennessee. So I was able to investigate the train wreck site, and then the legend goes that a local doctor had taken the monk's body from the train, and in his home, he had dissolved the skin from the bones in a tub there, and he used the skeleton in his medical practice. And so I had had a friend who knew someone, had a connection that had purchased a tub from the doctor's estate sale, and it was being housed in this older home being used as storage. And so we gained access to the home through that connection and was doing an investigation. And it became a year-long case study for us. The family allowed us to go into the home and investigate for a year, trying different techniques to see if the activity that we were getting while we were in there was from the tub itself and possibly the monk, or if it was coming from the home. And so, on one particular investigate night that we were investigating, we had re pre-recorded the voice of the homeowner who had some connection with some things that she had encountered in that home. She was an elderly lady, so she didn't typically go into that home anymore. But we played this recording, and as soon as we started playing this recording of her asking some different questions, the floor started shaking beneath me and my camera guy. And I've never had all of the equipment start going off in succession. In one room, we had the EDI box, which is an atmospheric device that reads temperature, vibration, electromagnetic frequency shifts. That starts going off. The REM pod, which is a proximity meter and also measures temperature, it started going off. We had flashlights set up, those started going off. Everything started going off at once, and the floor started shaking. So that was probably one of the most significant events that I've had happen over the years, was that one where everything started working, and then you just started actually physically feeling the floor shake whenever we introduced the homeowner's voice as a recording during that investigation.
What do you think makes the floor shake?
I don't know. The only thing that I can think of was that voice and those questions were worked as a trigger item. I don't know, but it made me feel like whatever we was dealing with was extremely powerful.
It must have been, I mean, I can kind of understand the hearing something,
Hmm.
seeing something. I mean, those are, things that can come through a vibrational sense, but boy, the floor shaking, that could be a really scary thing.
It really was. And like I said, at that point, we had just come off of a live investigation. We were setting everything up because we were going to leave it sitting out overnight. And at that moment, when the floor started shaking, both myself and my camera guy, we went ahead, we stepped on out, we did a prayer of protection and left. And then, of course, we had to go back the next evening to pick everything up because we had set these different devices and trigger items out, as well as the homeowner's voice that we were playing. We had set cameras out overnight to see if anything would happen over the course of 12 hours while this recording was set to play on a loop. We wanted to see if it would happen while we were gone, and what would happen during that time frame. But between, it was like a 45-minute segment between the loop there. So yeah, it was an extremely nerve-wracking experience, especially when we went back to pick things up, because it was unlike anything either of us had ever experienced before.
What did you find from what had happened during the period of time when you were gone?
That was actually really fascinating. We ended up covering it as an episode there in my series, and we did find that the voice did seem to trigger at some point during the middle of the night. We ended up capturing some weird chanting, and what sounded like somebody walking around inside of the house. We also had different tools go off. In response to the questions that the homeowner was asking. There were at least, so I believe the recording was about a 30-minute recording, and then it would sit in silence for 45 minutes and then loop again, and it would do this throughout the night. What was fascinating about this was during the time that things were quiet, we didn't have a whole lot of activity with our tools that we had sitting out. But whenever it would loop and the homeowner was asking the different questions, there were two times during the night during the segments where we got positive responses and interaction on either the REM pod, the flashlights, or on the EDI plus box, where things would light up in response to the questions during that looping session, which we thought was pretty fascinating.
So it definitely looked like something was responding to that voice. Is there
Yes.
anything about that person that you think would have had a connection with the monk or anything?
I believe so. We did get some interaction from the monk, but I believe that some of what we were experiencing was from the house itself. The homeowner was the first homeowner there of this house. And so she had owned it during or lived in it during the 70s and 80s. And there were a couple significant events of people in her family that had passed away in that home. And see, she didn't tell us this at first when we went in to investigate the tub. And we were getting so many interesting responses while we were filming because this was in the basement. We were getting so many interesting responses upstairs while we were filming in the basement that it really kind of confused and intrigued us because we thought, well, I don't know if something elsewhere is trying to get our attention. So when we called her to inquire a little more about the house, she's telling us about several of these different stories that she had encountered inside the house and when she had first moved in. Now, again, this would have been in the 70s and 80s, and I believe we filmed this in 2018 and 19. And so I believe that some of what we were encountering was some of the spirits that she had actually encountered early on when she was in there. So I think that because she had been out of there for so long where she was elderly and couldn't go in there, I believe that that somebody in there was reacting. It seemed like there were five spirits inside the house, and two of them relating to the monk, and the rest was something else. Not really. I don't believe that they were related. That they were related to her and some of the interactions that she had had.
Do you feel what evidence did you find that indicated that perhaps they were deceased relatives of hers or deceased people that she knew?
We were able to get her name was one of the disembodied voice responses. Without going in and actually saying it, we did get her name in there. And then also whenever like I said, when we played her voice, things started reacting in there. We believe that one was, if it wasn't her deceased husband, it was someone in there that was mimicking her deceased husband.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really hard to tell, isn't it? Because sometimes it's difficult because sometimes they can shapeshift in many ways physically whenever you see them, but also
Absolutely.
voices and with knowledge and with all kinds of things. You just really don't know for sure exactly what you're dealing with.
It is, and it is challenging, and that's one of the things that we found. So I co-own a an old jail here in Scott County, Tennessee, the historic Scott County Jail, and through that, I feel we've really, a lot of the time, whenever an investigator goes out, unless they are lucky enough to have a location like we did where we were able to go in and conduct research for that year, it's really hard to dive in and do consistent research. And so with our location, we're in there up to 16 hours a day, as far as having it set up as a museum and then having other teams come in and investigate. And I feel we've been able to really conduct some very deep research in there because we're able to take what we experience on a daily basis and then also what the teams experience when they come in. We're able to see, okay, this team comes in with this amount of people. We're able to look at trends and really see what is causing some of this activity. And we've inside of our jail, we've actually been able to identify seven spirits that we consistently have contact with. Now, the jail was open from 1904 until 2008. So you had a lot of people that went through this jail, that you could be interacting with their energy. But there are several that we know. I mean, you can tell by the way they respond and answer by using the dowsing rods or by just certain things they say and certain things they do with everyone that's been in there investigating. And that's been kind of a really cool thing because you're exactly right when you say they will shapeshift, they will sometimes mimic, they will do different things that makes it kind of hard to tell. But with what we're doing now with the jail and being in there as much as we are on a daily basis and talking to all the people that investigate, that's been probably one of my favorite things about doing this is really getting in and being able to um, conduct that true research.
Yeah, it sounds like a just a far more in-depth study.
Absolutely.
So, have you been able to find any names to the seven spirits that are interacting with you within this jail?
Absolutely. Yes. Sheriff Richard Ellis, he was killed at the front door back in 1925. And we have got his name. We have got consistent communication with him. We get both residual and intelligent activity from him there in the jail. He was 6'8", a Baptist preacher, and essentially he ran under the stance that he was going to abolish liquor in the community and make the county as dry as the Sahara. And so we just recently became a wet county here back in November. So that kind of changed some activity, but we have captured a 7-foot shadow figure on the first floor there by the drunk tanks. Multiple teams have captured that on video and photo equipment. And the drunk tank was somewhere, it would make sense that he would be in that area because he was such, so staunchly against liquor and moonshine. Also, just some of the different responses when he was killed at the front door. His body was brought in there, and they did have his wake inside the jail because they held them inside there, or I mean, excuse me, they lived inside there. So his body was held inside of the room there where the drunk tanks are held as well. Plus, he will talk about how he was killed. We have had that response through the tripwire as well as multiple teams have been speaking with the entity that said that he was shot there at the front door. So Sheriff Richard Ellis is one. Jerome Boyett, we do have his energy as well as Harvey Winchester inside there. Those were two inmates who were lynched via mob mountain justice. They were our last lynching that took place back in 1933, and they were two younger guys that were in there for unrelated crimes. But essentially, they were both cop killers, allegedly. And so um, they were young guys. One was 17, one was 23. And so we get their activity up on the third floor in the area where their cell was located. We get activity from a guy that goes by the name Big Roy. He's in there for crimes against females. And he consistently, this is one of the things I think is fascinating because he likes it when women are up there by themselves. And we won't always tell the people when they come in to do investigations about some of the different spirits in there. We have our famous, well-known ones, but we don't tell them about everyone. And when they stay in the area by themselves, they get the constant same reactions from Big Roy's area throughout. Men get a certain type of response, women get a different kind of response, and it's pretty fascinating. Um,
What is the
we
difference? What kind of response do they get?
Women will tend to have their hair pulled. He will flirt with them, sometimes say some kind of crude things to them. With men, he tends to be a little more challenging if men are up there, especially if men are up there with another woman. So it can go from being sort of flirty to being a little more aggressive toward the men when they're up there. Um,
Why do you think some I mean, because no doubt how many people went through this jail, how many people died, from that in that length of time, it would have probably been a pretty large number.
yeah.
Why do you think there are only certain spirits that interact with you or come through? Why do you think that is?
That's a really good question. Sometimes from what we're finding, it tends to be more they want to share their story. There's been a couple instances where they have helped us fill in the blanks with some of the history that we have in our true crime museum there. Um, a lot of it just seems to sort of be a deposit of energy. The building itself is made of sandstone, which has a high concentration of quartz in it, which seems to be a good conductor. Plus, you have the types of things that happened inside the jail, whether it be death or just people who are just in there and they're forced to kind of sit there with their own thoughts. Sometimes it seems like it's somebody that might just be sort of passing through, and it's more of a residual type energy deposit that could have happened in that area right there. Other times it seems like it's more of we want to share we want you to share our story. And we find that it just depends on how they're being talked to. I'm a firm believer that whatever energy you go in with is going to determine what you get out. I think we play just as important of a role in getting that type of activity with our intention and with the way we go in versus just going in and interrogating, um, the spirits when they're in there. When you go in an interrogation sort of manner, they don't seem to respond as well as they do when you come in and sit down and just try to have a normal conversation like you would have, between you and me, just sitting here talking. That tends to yield better results. There's other areas where if you come in asking questions, they seem to want to shut down. But if you approach it by either playing music or sitting in joking and going at it from a more kind of joking, flirtatious type manner. And that's what tends to happen in the women's cell over in maximum security. It's almost like a party atmosphere, So and music is something in that area that tends to bring out activity. So um I feel like some of it, I mean, and there is a lot of residual activity too. Footsteps, we're able to pinpoint a specific time when we capture the footsteps. And we do believe that that's a jailer. That was something that they did every day at that specific time. And so during that hour, within a 20-minute span, um, you will almost always throughout the night during certain hours hear some type of footsteps come through, and that would have been when they would have been going up to do their roll chain, or excuse me, their roll call and do the check on the sales. So
Do you ever have anything moved around? Is there any indication that they have enough energy to actually physically move something?
yes, one instance that comes to mind. Actually, there's two instances that come to mind. One, we did capture on video a photo being pulled off the wall. Now, it wasn't just that the photo just fell. The photo actually comes off the wall, flips in midair, and is thrown 4.5 feet across the room. What's interesting when you watch this video, you'll actually see as the photo starts to come down, you will see a shadow arm come out and hits it and essentially throws it the 4.5 feet. We've had that happen. We've also had in the kitchen, if somebody leaves a sharp knife or razor blade, sometimes those have actually gone missing and been found either in a different spot on the table or found in a different area altogether. And that actually came about because when we were cleaning, when my business partner and I got access to the jail, and we were going in doing a deep clean. Inside the dumbwaiter system, I found a razor blade hidden back up under some of the back up in some up under some of the area. It had been affixed back to the very back, and so we pulled it out, set it on the table, and I called my business partner and I said, "Hey, whenever you come back into town tomorrow, you need to come up here and see this razor blade that I found." So I left it as well as the cleaning supplies sitting on the table. And when we came back in the next day to show it to her, It wasn't anywhere to be found. We have still yet to find this razor blade. And whenever one of the paranormal teams came in, it was one of our first, they asked what the owners of the museum was missing. And they got a very cool EVP of a male voice that said razor. We've also had a pair of scissors go missing, as well as a paint scraper. The paint scraper we did find on a different floor, and the scissors we did find on the very next day on a different spot of the table. They had disappeared. They were there the next day. So that's what got us to start telling teams that it's like, hey, if you've got something sharp, whether it be a knife, a razor blade, or any type of contraband. We've had teams make contraband that they could bring in, and they'll set them out and see if they're moved, put a camera on them, or just set them out, mark the spot, and leave during the investigation, come back, and they've had things move. So it's a pretty interesting phenomena that happens from time to time.
Do you feel like they're thinking in terms of using these as weaponry, or do you think it's just random that these happen to be sharp objects?
I mean, that's very possible. Contraband was something that has been found at the jail from, the different guards there. Also, the kitchen from 1986 on, the inmates, they helped out in the kitchen, the trustees. And so there have been instances where, they've had access to those items for one reason or another. So it could be that they intend to want to, you know, hold on to them. I firmly believe at some point we're going to find that razor blade in some odd, bizarre place. Um, it's been 4 years and we've yet to find it, and we've gone through the piping system, and we found a lot of other things, but we have yet to find this razor blade. So somebody, I think, is keeping it for safekeeping and not telling us where it is. Now, I will say we did find a comb upstairs in the women's cell, up pushed in above one of the lights, and we left it there. And so we will tell some of the teams about that comb that's in there, and that they can use it as a trigger item as long as they put it back. And two teams so far have gotten either mine or put it back. So, or leave it alone. We've had several, so we believe that whoever's energy is in that room is potentially attached to that comb. So trigger items and such work really good there at the jail.
It sounds like it. So have you been able to communicate at all to figure out which one of the spirits may be doing some of these physical things?
Um, we're not really sure on that second floor because there is a shadow figure that we do see quite often. Um, we're not really sure if that, we believe it is a former inmate rather than one of the guards or one of the sheriffs, just because of the way he tends to be a little more standoffish and the way he likes for folks to investigate. Um, as far as the third floor, we do believe a lot of the footsteps and stuff that we hear, we do believe that that is one of the guards. We have not been able to determine as far as the movement of the sharp objects and stuff, or the throwing of the photos. We've not been able to really determine who that is.
Yeah. Wow. So what's the most bizarre thing you have actually recorded that they've said?
Are you talking about in general or
Well,
there at the jail?
let's do both. Let's do the jail and then in general as well.
Okay. As far as I would have to say, I don't know about the most bizarre, but probably one of the most fascinating would be we so we use something known as an Ovilus 5, and that is a word bank that's got, I believe it has like 2,500 words in it. And the theory behind it is that the spirit can use its energy to manipulate and give us words inside that word bank to help either answer questions or give us sentences or what have you. And so sometimes it kind of seems like the word bank just spits off mumbo jumbo. And you have to look at a lot of different things whenever you're doing this, because if you're limited to only 2,500 words, sometimes they may be saying something that is a little bit it doesn't make sense. But when you really start to look at it, like for instance, we get the word Ida on there a lot, IDA. And we had several teams telling us we keep getting Ida. Is there a woman named Ida? Well, in looking at it, the largest town, which is 10 minutes away from the jail, is a town called Onada. And so we believe whenever we get Ida on there that they are talking about the town of Onada. And there's just not a word for Onada inside of that word bank. So we kind of have to look at that sort of thing. But it's also sort of irregular for them to repeat the same word multiple times, in succession. And so during one investigation, we had a team in there that kept getting the word anvil. And he got it 3 times in one night, and they got it in the same area. They got it in the main museum room and then there at the front door. And so after the investigation, I was locking up, and the team said, "Hey, we want to run some things by you and see if this means anything." And just in passing, the guy said, "We got the word anvil on 3 different occasions." And I said, "Okay." I said, "I'm not sure what that would mean. However, I had a book that had just been written by an author that had written about the Jerome Boyett and Harvey Winchester lynchings that took place there at the jail in 1933. The book had not been published yet. It was the author's release. He had brought it in to us to proofread. And while we were proofreading it, we saw that the story was written by a character by the name of Anvil Clemens. And so I had actually been reading it the day before. And so I pulled the book out, showed it to the team that was there, and I said, "I don't know if this Anvil Clemens could have something to do that. Maybe it's a name rather than a word." So I said I would reach out to the author. So I reached out to the author, J.H. Gason, and I said, explain the situation. I said, "Can you tell me a little bit more about Anvil Clemens? Because I'm not aware of this guy in the jail." And so Gason proceeded to tell me that Anvil Clemens was a copyright character. He had changed the name of the original jailer that was on duty the night that Jerome and Harvey had been taken out of the jail and lynched. And so he said Anvil was actually the jailer's nickname because he had been beat so bad by the mob when they had broken into the jail that it said that it looked like he had been beaten like an anvil. And so the name ended up sticking. And so they called him Anvil. And so, and I told the author where the team had captured this word, and it was right there at the entryway to the door. And they said that when he was beaten, his blood was all over the walls. Now he did survive, but the blood was all over the walls. And so, I went back to the team, told them what we had found, and it really helped us to put together some more pieces to this story. That would probably be one of the things that is the most fascinating, because we were able to tie it to the history, and it actually changed the author of the book's belief system when it came to the paranormal. He was pretty much a skeptic, a little bit of an unbeliever, and it really opened his eyes. And we've been in constant communication with him because and he's done interviews where he said, never really put a whole lot of stock into it until this happened, because there was no way that the team would have even known of the name anvil. This was not something that was common research that was out there. The author was the great grandson of Anvil. And so, unless you're in the area and close to the case, you wouldn't have even known that. And if they had by chance gotten their hands on the owner's notes before the book was released, they wouldn't have even known that that was the jailer. So it was a pretty fascinating capture in our opinion, and we believe that that just helped to kind of put some more of the story together. As far as um, me and my travels, probably one of the best captures and most fascinating EVPs that I've captured takes place at Brushy Mountain State Prison. One of the things that I like to do whenever I go on these investigations and highlight them on the series is if I get the opportunity to lay down and sleep at the location, I do like to do that because I feel like we get different types of activity when we're investigating. Like I'd mentioned earlier, if, you know, what we bring in, I think helps to influence the type of activity that we're able to take out. And so when you're sleeping, from what I've found, you're not actively investigating, you're in more of a vulnerable state. And so I had been investigating at Brushy Mountain State Prison all night long. And so I had been doing that solo. Well, the next morning, I decided I was going to lay down and take a 3 hour nap. And so I set up my camera, set up my audio, and I decided I was going to sleep in the solitary confinement area, which is known as the hole. And it's dark 24/7 inside there. That's where they would put the worst of the worst if you misbehaved. And it was said that whenever they would come out, they would have a hard time walking and seeing because of being so sensory deprived. If they were in there for any extended period of time, it took a while for them to get their senses back. And so I laid down, not really knowing if I would be able to sleep very well, but I was so tired. I went to sleep, and on the recorder, you actually hear somebody walking up to the cell door, and this just deep, almost guttural voice of something tells me night night while I'm laying there. Um, I captured what sounded like voices of men. There were no men on the property. I captured what sounded like men talking between the two cells. Um, they're just having a conversation, and then another man says, "Help me." And it's kind of heartbreaking because it sounds like he's really struggling. Um, Also, in the area above is the laundry area. There was no power in this area. And at one point, you end up hearing what sounds like a dryer running, because dryers kind of have that distinct sort of sound with the door and with the motion of the dryer inside there. And then I captured what sounded like 5 minutes of somebody bouncing a ball against a wall. And I couldn't figure out what it was. It's just this constant rhythmic, just bouncing like it hits the ground, hits the wall, hits the ground, hits the wall. And it goes on for about 5 minutes. And so I was doing an interview about that capture, and one of the guys that was interviewing me, he just happened to be a former security guard. And he said, that actually really makes sense because in those maximum security penitentiaries, they would often give them a rubber ball because that was something that was not easily fashioned into some type of shank or some type of contraband. And so I can just imagine, when somebody would be sitting in there, that they would just be bouncing this ball. Um, so that was probably those EVPs were Class A. It was about 3 minutes and 15 seconds of of disembodied voices, sounds, things that were captured during that 3 hours that I was sleeping in there. I like to say I've seen and heard a whole lot, but I feel like I'm constantly learning. And when I think I've experienced it all, something something else happens. It's just that would probably have to be two of the more incredible things that I've heard and experienced over time of being a location owner as well as an investigator.
Have you ever had where you felt like something was touching you or just like within your personal space?
I have had that on several occasions. When the very first investigation that I did, it was in a bar at a local marina, and it was my first formal investigation. I was asking questions of what I thought was a lady who had died there at the bar, and she was a regular. And so as I was asking questions, I felt something just kind of like it pushed on my pants leg and or on my thigh. And I thought, oh, it's a muscle spasm from standing for so long. And I didn't really pay a lot of attention until all of a sudden it pulled on my pocket. And the guy that I was investigating with, I mentioned it to him, and he said, "It sounds like you were just touched." And so after that, from what I've experienced, when something touches you, it tends to sort of almost feel like either you're walking through a spider web or a cobweb. It almost has that sort of light spider web type feeling, or it'll feel like just a cold pressure on your skin. I've been scratched a couple times. Personally, I don't think it was anything negative. We don't know how. I mean, it's always possible it could be. However, I tend to err on the side that we don't know how our body reacts or how well they can touch. It may come across as a scratch. Um, but it's something that's not uncommon, being in a haunted location on a daily basis or going to certain places to be touched, have hair pulled, have shirts pulled, that sort of thing.
Have you had any poltergeist type experiences or things that are thrown or something comes on, goes off? Of course, I know your equipment is doing that, but anything outside of the equipment that you notice?
Only on a few occasions. I was investigating a house, or excuse me, a funeral home down in Mississippi, and I did capture a photo falling coming off the wall. We did have, and it was a big, huge photo. Woke us up in the middle of the night. I haven't. I haven't experienced anything in front of my own eyes, soaring across the room or anything of that nature. It's always been either in another area, something has fallen, it's not been right before my eyes, um, on any of the investigations or anything of that nature.
Have you ever felt in danger?
Um, there's been a few times where I've felt that I've needed to step away from the situation. I tend to listen to my gut on that, or if the spirits seem to be agitated or seem to, when they say they're done and they say to leave, I do respect that and move on to a different space. I would have to say there's only ever been two times where I've had something that I feel has followed me home. Um, and then there have been several times where I've felt as though I've needed to, things are getting a bit intense. I need to step away from the situation. And so when that happens, I have no problem stepping out because I feel I want to be respectful, regardless of where I'm at. And I feel like the communication, any communication I get, whether it's a knock, a voice, a positive response on any of the tools, I feel like that's a gift from the spirit, because they don't have to communicate with me. So if I'm told to leave or if I feel in my gut that something just isn't quite right, I have no problem stepping away from the situation and letting things kind of calm down. So I have had that on a few occasions.
It's probably a wise thing to do. So
Yeah.
now you have a show, and you go out on a bike to different haunted locations and do research. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So what gave you the idea to do this?
Well, I've always loved motorcycles, been an avid motorcyclist for about 20 years now. And honestly, I was going out investigating with the team, and I found that while I would go on investigations with them, if it was, if it was a somewhat close investigation, I would ride my motorcycle to those places. And I found that it was a great way to ground and center myself before the investigations. I don't like to go in anywhere with a bad attitude or when I'm stressed or not feeling well. I like to go in with my focus being on the investigation itself. And so I was kind of joking around with a friend. I was talking about. I said, yeah, just I was talking about riding to investigation. I said, you can just call me the ghost biker. And she said, well, I would watch that if that was a show. And so I got to thinking on it. And, not only was I riding my motorcycle on different investigations, but if I was traveling for work or if we weren't out investigating as a team, I was going out on the motorcycle and doing more urban exploration and taking photos of some unique and interesting places and putting it on my social media. So, with my background being in marketing and photography, I got to thinking about it. And so, on a whim, I came up with the branding of Ghost Biker with my logo and what I wanted my stories to be like and how I wanted the videos to be. And I just thought, why not? Put it out there and see if anyone is interested. And it actually, after the first season, had so much success that I ended up stepping away from the team because I didn't feel that I could do everything I was doing with the team and develop my web series like I was. And so I went into that full time. Um, Developing the brand, and now here we are. We're doing season 8 this year. Had very successful season 7 and previous seasons. And I really like to investigate with that the lesser known places, the places that either have never been investigated before, or maybe the places that people haven't seen. And I like to use the motorcycle as a way to promote paranormal tourism and to encourage people that, yes, you have these great, well known locations like Waverly Hills and the Stanley Hotel and all of these places that have been really commercialized. But I like to tell people if you take a map and close your eyes and touch anywhere on that map, I guarantee that anywhere you touch is going to have a unique and interesting story that needs to be told. And so with my series, I like to highlight those places, telling some type of interesting fact about the city or town that I'm visiting, tell the history as to why I'm there. And then the paranormal activity is really just the icing on top of the cake. I like to pick places that have interesting enough history or legends that if we don't get paranormal activity, that's okay. It's interesting enough area to share the story of.
Well, if you are ever through Springfield, Missouri, I want to invite you to get in touch with me because we have plenty
Oh,
of haunted places here.
oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, one of them I actually owned. It was a small rental house, and the
Hmm.
tenants had all kinds of activity happening there. And then we found out that there had been a suicide happen in the attic of the house. And
Hmm.
there was just all kinds of things that obviously that residual of that person was still very present.
Absolutely. And I would love to come by that area because I do feel like these places, we do haunted motorcycle rides and stuff. There's been times I've partnered with Harley Davidson to do meet and greet events, and then also we do those motorcycle rides through Ghost Biker and then through the historic jail. And one of my favorite things is to take an area that you don't even really know the story of it that you're passing through, and tell the history and the story of how that town came to be, and some of the stories that maybe you and I that aren't from that area, we don't really know them, but the people who live there, they know these stories because most places have, a lady in white or a crybaby bridge or the tunnel where the kids push your car. Most towns throughout the country have got some interesting stories that are unique to them, that I think those stories, if somebody's not out there telling them, they're just going to die with the people of the community if they're not shared. So that's been the mission of my show, and to really encourage that travel and encourage that storytelling through the paranormal, to kind of gain a different audience that might not think about stopping there or might not be interested in history and such, but they're interested from a different standpoint.
Absolutely. And where may people go to see your show, Ghost Biker?
Yeah, so I'm very active on Facebook and YouTube. They can go under Ghost Biker Explorations, or most of the time, if you just key in Ghost Biker, it'll pop up on Facebook, YouTube, and also ghostbikerexplorations.com to watch all of the previous seasons. I also do a live stream every Thursday night where I have different guests on, as well as I like to say people who are doing things in the community. And that's not just the paranormal, but also cryptids and UFOs. We always try to reach out to a broad audience and let folks know who are doing things out there. And my series releases every Tuesday during the month of October. You can also find out more about my location. It is the historic Scott County Jail. We have it set up as a true crime museum during the day and a paranormal research center at night. We have something for everyone. If you're more into the history side of things, you can come in during the day. But if you like the history with a spookier side, we have flashlight tours where we show you video, photo, and audio evidence while we tell you the history inside there. And then we also offer private paranormal investigations. And our newest location is the Village of Historic Rugby, where we do all of their after dark tours. So you can find that under Historic Rugby After Dark.
Wow. Sounds like you're a busy girl.
Yes, yes, and I'm really fascinated because I'm going to be going out to Wisconsin this week for the CapsCon, Cryptids, Anomalies, Paranormal convention out there. And I'm going to be going on my first ever Bigfoot hike this weekend, and I thought, what better place than Wisconsin to do that. We've heard a lot of stories of occurrences here in Tennessee, but this is going to be my first time dipping my toes into that. And like you said, it's all related. We find that with the paranormal, with the ufologists, with the cryptids, that there seems to be a connection between all of it. And I'm really excited to dive in, learn more, and hopefully expand my research on that, and be doing some of that here in the area as well.
Well, I wish you luck on that trip, and hopefully you'll see a Bigfoot along the way. I'm going to go ahead and end our interview, Miranda. Thank you so much for joining me, and I really appreciate all the rich information. I learned a lot. I'm sure the audience will as well. And thank you very much. I'll let you know when this comes out.
Wonderful. Thank you, Linda. It's been a
Uh-huh.
pleasure.